Hello, everybody. It's Saturday. This would be like the live uploads I do. I actually wasn't going to do one because I posted the Mark study that I've been doing. The Gospel of Mark, started it in North Bergen. Well, I finished that the other day. It's already been posted. But I post the complete links to the whole Gospel of Mark, video and text, and I post those as pages onto the Blogger site, which is Corpus Christi Outreach Ministries, and onto the WordPress site, which is CC Outreach 87. I was thinking of just posting them as regular, how I spam everybody with those posts. But anyway, so I did that. And I forget sometimes because I have different links I'm going to add, and believe it or not, I tried the best to remember I'm saving certain links, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I'm like, sometimes I'll forget, and then when I'm just going through the news sites, which I just did, and I'll comment in a minute, but then the Lord will bring to my remembrance, you got to link a certain thing here and there. And so some of the sites when I post, because I post so much and tweet, they think you're a bot, or they always ask, are you a robot, are you a robot? No, I'm not a robot. I'll do one more. Hopefully this is it on the shooter. I think what I've tried to share about the shooter, we'll call this the real story about the shooter, something like that. I've read just about every various angle and question, but there was a Republican candidate for Congress, I forget the name. So I read something he wrote the other day, and it said all the unanswered questions. And he had some things that probably are legitimate, but some that might have gone into more of the conspiratorial other things. But then I checked the Christian news also, like from particular sites. And one Christian, somewhat of a prominent Christian online news magazine, they had posted this congressman's complete, post on things that some, I don't know if I would agree with. And I found it interesting that it made it, that much publicity, that it made it to a site. I think what I said in most of my videos is probably true. And I'll just end with this. I don't want to talk too much on this shooter. I believe that just from things I've read on regular sites, comments, normally it's comments that the officials make in the beginning. Even the local sheriff from the Vegas area and those guys, that's normally the first day or two is when you pick up on, what was it? And I think what I said at this whole thing was, more than likely this man Paddock had some type of connection or interest with ISIS. However that formed, his girlfriend also made trips to Dubai, this Mary Lou, whatever her name is. Somehow he probably had something. And that's not just hearsay simply because ISIS not only claimed responsibility, but ISIS also puts out a written newspaper. And their most recent one that came out a few days ago had the Mandalay Bay Hotel where the shooting took place in red. So they're claiming this not as, and there's others that they have not claimed. Meaning he probably somehow, we don't know everything, but maybe somehow got influenced by that. There is also, and I'll just put together all the different reports I read the last few days. There's a person who used to work with Trump, a Trump insider, that in the past he's kind of leaked things, because you have a lot of leaking in Washington. But he also released something that said, for the most part, this is supposedly a leak, but for the most part, they do know there's some connection. But the insiders, and sometimes we refer to things as deep state, and deep state means this. When President Obama was president, a lot of people felt he was personally like covering up links that were ISIS-related links, and maybe you had evidence of various bombings and so forth. And that played into the whole, Obama Muslim thing. But some might say, but would Trump do the same? A president, as you can see, does not really have control of all of what we refer to as the intelligence agencies. When we had a new fire chief at the fire department, and they came in and, look, if the people that have been there for a long time, firefighters, captains, and all, if they don't agree with that chief, no matter how much authority that particular new fire chief would have, you ain't going to make it, or if you want to implement something. So in essence, deep state would refer to people, maybe another term I could use, but people that have been inside these agencies for a very long time. Now, some of them, John, do some of them really hate Trump and all? Many of the leaks that came out these last 8 months and so came from people like that. These were people leaking from intelligence agencies and all. But this one ex-Trump man who put something out, I'll also comment on a New York Times reporter and her analysis of it. But he said, no, there's connections to ISIS with the shooter, but the deep state or people on the inside actually don't want to give the credit to ISIS. And this is what I said, okay? Because they feel it would be like there'd be after effects, like it would trigger others that, yes, let's go do these types of things. And I had thought that there's probably some connection to this ISIS thing more so. The New York Times reporter, I read her tweets the other day, and this is a lady from New York Times. She basically said the same thing here, except, and then she said, but as of so far, we have no evidence. But remember, what is evidence? Evidence is normally something you think would be reported to you by intelligence agents. And if they don't report those things, not because they're colluding with ISIS, or primarily because they don't want to give credit, that's a part of warfare, you understand? How do we fight against acts of terror? And if one of the strategies, which indeed is a true strategy, is if ISIS gets mad because, wait a minute, this guy did convert and was part of us, and now if the U.S. media and intelligence and so forth, if they simply say nope, that gets ISIS pissed because they're not getting credit for something that maybe they have some connection to. And then it does indeed hinder them thinking, one of our soldiers gave his life for their radical cause. That's how they see that. And then it would make others think, wait a minute, because part of the play of radicalism is I'm going to die. The more radical ones say I'm going to go to heaven when I die, and all the virgins will. But say if part of it is, wait a minute, I'm not even going to get credit. I'm going to die for the cause. I was thinking I'd be some great, the whole world would know he did it. And if the whole world is now, or at least U.S. media and all, is going to say, oh no, as far as we know, no, that does hinder radicalism. So I think that's what it is. There's probably some connection with this man. Now, I wasn't going to do it. Yesterday, I'll post that video. I uploaded it to Facebook, but it's going to be part of a post tomorrow, a whole teaching post. And I saw my friend Furman, and I was looking for him. I thought yesterday, I said, I need to go see if he's around. And I drove past his truck many days and haven't stopped. I was going into town the last few weeks. But then, sure enough, I stopped yesterday. It was interesting. It brought some old memories. I stayed with Furman maybe for 4 hours, just hanging out. But Furman, when he was in prison, he did prison time like a lot of my friends. And he really got into God. He got saved and dedicated. And he told me, John, he says, he used to write a lot of letters. I did this not from prison, but when I first started working with guys on the streets, and a lot of them went to prison. This is even in Kingsville. I've written thousands of hand letters to my brothers that were in prison. I mean, I probably, maybe 1,000 at least. I used to have a lot of them, and the brothers would write me back, and I would tell them what's going on, and, Bible questions. And that was just one-on-one, back in the days before we had a blog and all these other types of things. Well, when Furman was in prison and he got into God, he started writing guys. And then he started his own newsletter from the prison. And it was first called The Guiding Light. Okay, he joked about it. He said, I think that's like a soap opera. Then they changed the name of the newsletter to Ambassadors for Christ. And he actually, a relative bought him a word processor, like a $300 word processor. I don't know if the rules are still the same now, but eventually the TDC, Texas Department of Corrections, cracked down on Furman and said, you can't be your own publisher. And so he gave the name of publisher to one of his other friends on the outside, and he remained the editor. He actually said there were people from all over the country, and it was like a Christian newsletter that he'd send out, and people would send in. And I was telling him, I said, I did the same thing for him. He said, what would possess us, John? He said, see, that's sort of like what I had, excited enough to personally write. I said, yes. I said, and I wrote people back in those days, and it was just one-on-one. And it just reminded me. And then when I got home, I read, I won't criticize Colder Times too much. I don't even know if this is the one. But then I read the paper every day. And then I read an article. It said how local officials, law enforcement and all, it was a fine article, but they had a meeting with all the houses of worship, pastors, leaders, talking about how to protect themselves, how to protect their congregations, how to be safe, look out for. And many of the people that we see as protecting ourselves from, I'm reading it and thinking, actually I was out with all these friends of mine. I told Furman, I said, when I talked to Austin the other day and had a good fellowship with Austin, and he said, but John, I got to know it from the Bible. You know, I don't like listening to other people. It was a long talk. I said, that's how I was, and I still am. I said, my original Bible, that's it. I said, I remember when I first got saved, started seeking God. I said, there were other churches and people and books, and I was like, no, I got to find this in the Bible myself. I'm not going to take other people's word for it. It's exactly how Austin is. And Furman's the same way. We were kind of talking about that. And so I told Austin that day, I said, that's how I am. I said, that's how this works. It's got to be you and God, Austin. I said, that I'm not here because I'm not doing the things I do because there's some, you know, or religious group. Or I said, no, it was the same thing, that this is real. And I get to hear God. And Furman, we were talking the same way. And Furman, as we were fellowshipping yesterday, he said, you know, John, talking about, he says, the preachers, he mentioned Charles Spurgeon and others, and we're sitting by the water. He said, sometimes I feel like we got to go way out in the water, and sometimes it gets hard. And I quoted verses. I said, you know, Paul said, we have the fellowship of the sufferings of Jesus. And I explained that to Furman. I said, when we go through a lot of suffering, that's like a fellowship. That's an honor. They rejoice that they could suffer for his name. And I said, and some of those men that you're talking about, Furman, when they went way out into the water, and I talked about the vision of Ezekiel, he might not have been familiar with it, but Ezekiel has this vision. This guy's going out, and it's getting deeper and deeper and deeper. I said, this is really what we're all doing, Furman. All of us are in these different situations we're in. And it's up to us to say, Lord, I'm going to do this thing, whatever it is that you've called me to do. And you go out in the deep, meaning you're trusting in God. And so, I just thought it interesting, that article was how to protect yourselves and all. You know, but when my friend Austin or Furman or whoever else, when they begin realizing, which they have in various degrees, I'm not going to go commit a crime, not because I might get in trouble, which has happened, of course, to my friends, not because I might go to prison. That type of rehabilitation never lasts, because many of my friends are back in, they're out, they're in, I don't see them for 8 months, so he must be in jail again. The only thing that really is going to do this, really, is God and their connection. And so I understood the article in the Colder Times about how to protect ourselves. Look, just be out with them. Everyone's not going to do it like I do it. But that just, so I'll upload this right now. Maybe today this will be a rollout, unless I post this link to tomorrow's link, because I've been doing a lot of links. There's so many, I could quote all types of verses and scriptures. They're all over here. I like that one. My name is John, and I was named after John the Baptist. I keep that. The verse on one of the things the other day, I liked it. It was the reading from the Mass. Look, I'm going to teach the Mass verses tomorrow. And look, I'm so sometimes disorganized. I threw out I'm doing the links, I'm doing the text. I had to, these are all the papers. I burned them after I get so many of the little outlines that I got to write the notes and all this. I get that the room gets filled up with them. So I burn all those notes as an offering. I mean, I burnt hundreds of them because I don't like to throw them out. They're kind of like sacred. Here's the verse, here's the scripture I had to post, and there's the offering to God. But the John the Baptist one of the verses from the Mass last week had to do with Jesus rebuking them, and I like that verse. The verses for tomorrow, which I'm going to teach, it'll go up like in a week, but it's from Isaiah, the parable of the vineyard. And as I'm looking at, okay, parable of the vineyard, Isaiah 5, and I'm thinking in my head, oh, I wonder if I'll go to the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus gives this parable. It's the same type of parable. Sure enough, that's one of the verses from tomorrow's Mass, which I'm going to teach them all. And I said, oh, it's already in there. So we're trying to keep this trend line that we teach. We don't look. I found it a little maybe questionable that a mainline Christian online thing would have had that article. I read that article from this candidate for Congress, Republican. And there's a lot of things in it that I could personally debunk. Talks about some of the videos from the shooter, and we know for sure that some of these other videos show the shooter on the 4th floor and all. No, I think some of those videos are questionable tonight. But then for it to get so much play, this shooter thing has turned into, and I think we can understand it, and those in official capacity see it too, that it's got a real potential for an on-life conspiracy for a very long time. But I do think that that's probably the most accurate, my little thing that I gave you. Okay? It's possible that people that are in our security agencies and all, it seems like some of the comments from the sheriff and local people on the scene, look, they came right out and kind of indicated. And then the ISIS people put out their Mandalay Bay newsletter in blood, drenched in blood. And even the New York Times tweets from a New York Times reporter kind of followed the same line. So I think there's probably something, and maybe we just don't want to give credit, because that would indeed, one of the things said, they're afraid that it gives a cascade effect. That's what I said. That we might have just decided to not attribute anymore. That could be a policy. So this is number one, and we'll bless you guys. The real answer to all of these things is like the little example I gave about my friends. A change of heart, redemption. Christ died for humanity, to redeem humanity back to God. We are all before the face of God. And if we understand that we give an account to God for our actions, that's the thing that can bring change into society. And when individuals, radicalized groups, or even human governments, when they justify violence in various ways, many in the Western world don't question some of the wars, some of the involvements. President Trump did make a comment. This is the calm before the storm. And they're asking him, now, what do you mean? About North Korea, probably. And maybe there's going to be action. I'm not going to debate the whole, but I'm just saying, people that are told whether it's a country, whether it's North Korea or somebody else, say, well, there's certain weapons or things rightfully that we don't want to have. And then they see other countries that have these things. Say, and then people that, like ISIS, radicalized groups, they say, you pin us as, and look, I don't agree with ISIS. I'm not giving a defense. But they're saying killing and war and murder have been going on for many, many years. And some have justified those things. They say, that this is how radicalism starts. They say, look, this is really the root of it. It's not that they want to come kill people in the West because they hate the West's freedom. Even the statements about the Vegas shooter, their position is, we're going to hit, attack, terrorize any members of the coalition that we're leading, that are out to get us. They said, if you're part of the members of that coalition, you're a legitimate target. That's how they view that. They view it as a war, and they view the killing of innocents in their mind is, when we kill innocents in war, we refer to it as collateral damage, meaning we don't target innocent people, but we actually recognize before we drop the bomb or before the drone hits a targeted site, we recognize we have a certain percentage of civilians that we consider permissible, meaning we don't intend to kill those people, but it's a certain percentage that's permissible. So before the raids are made by the Western world, before we understand, well, some will die, that's sort of the price for war, that we try to minimize it. And in their radical mind, they say, we will possibly target, and I don't agree with it, but we'll possibly target civilians in the countries that are a coalition against us. And even if the number of ones that we killed, though they're civilians, they said it's still accomplishing their goal in their mind. They're saying people that are citizens of countries that are part of the coalition. I even read a thing years ago from bin Laden that was printed in the CNN. He said it was an argument. CNN posted it years ago, but the other news organizations did not. And he gave a defense. He said, and those that ask why we this was from bin Laden. It says, those who ask, how could you target civilians? I didn't agree with what he said, but he said, you got to understand, your countries, you elect your leaders. And if your leaders are elected by you, that's how we justify. Now, I'm not justifying any of that, but I'm saying there's a line. It's a fine line. Even countries go down that line in justifying action. Okay? So I do want to bless you guys. I wanted to share those few little points, and we have a whole teaching post for tomorrow.